The gunshot that echoed through the canyon walls wasn't what stopped Warren Cole in his tracks. It was the voice that followed afterward, soft and melodic, singing a hymn as if the violence of the frontier meant nothing at all. He had been riding toward San Jose, California, for 3 days straight, his chestnut mare tired, and his own body aching from sleeping on hard ground, when he heard that impossible sound drifting through the dusty air of late afternoon. The year was 1878, and Warren had seen enough of the West to know that a woman's voice in these parts, especially one singing with such peace, was either a miracle or a trap. He dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a scraggly juniper tree that somehow survived in this harsh landscape. His hand rested on the colt at his hip, more out of habit than genuine fear. Warren was 26 years old, tall and weathered from years of working cattle drives and odd jobs across the territories. His dark hair fell past his collar, and his blue eyes had seen too much death for someone his age. But that voice, it made him remember there was still beauty somewhere in this hard world. Following the sound, he climbed over a rocky outcrop and found himself looking down into a small hollow where a covered wagon sat tilted on a broken wheel. A woman stood beside it, her back to him, hanging wet clothes on a makeshift line strung between the wagon and a cottonwood tree. She wore a simple calico dress, faded from sun and washing, and her auburn hair was pinned up loosely, with strands escaping to curl at her neck. She was singing about green pastures and still waters, and Warren realized she was completely alone. He cleared his throat, not wanting to startle her too badly, but she spun around with a gasp anyway, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes were green as new grass after rain, and even with dirt on her face and obvious exhaustion in her features, she was beautiful in a way that hit him square in the chest. "I did not mean to frighten you, madam," Warren said quickly, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "I heard the gunshot and then your singing. Are you hurt?" She studied him for a long moment, her breathing still quick with surprise. "The gunshot was me," she said finally, her voice just as lovely in speech as in song. "There was a rattlesnake near my supplies. I am fine, though I cannot say the same for my wagon wheel or my husband." Warren's heart sank a little at the mention of a husband, though he couldn't say why it mattered. "Is he injured? I know some doctoring." "He is dead," she said flatly, looking away toward the hills. 2 weeks now. Cholera took him near Carson City. I have been trying to reach San Jose where his brother lives, but the wheel broke yesterday and I have been stuck here since. "I am sorry for your loss, madam." Warren climbed down into the hollow, moving slowly so she wouldn't feel threatened. "My name is Warren Cole. I am headed to San Jose myself. I could help with that wheel if you have got a spare hub." "Delia Brennan," she replied, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "I do have a spare, but I have not been able to lift the wagon high enough to make the change. I have been trying since dawn." Warren looked at the wagon, assessing the situation. It was a mess, but nothing he couldn't fix with some effort and the right leverage. "Do you have a good sturdy branch I could use as a lever, and some rocks to prop it up?" Delia nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe 23 or 24, with a face that showed both softness and steel. "I can gather rocks. There are plenty around here." They worked together for the next 2 hours, and Warren found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. She was strong for her size, carrying rocks without complaint and following his instructions precisely. She didn't chatter nervously like some women might have, but she also wasn't unfriendly. When he grunted with effort, trying to lever the wagon high enough, she was right there with another stone to wedge underneath. "You have done this before," Warren observed as they finally got the wagon high enough to work on the wheel. My father was a wheelwright in Ohio, Delia said, wiping sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. I grew up in his shop. I know how it should be done. I just lack the strength to do it alone. Warren carefully removed the broken wheel, examining the damage. The hub had cracked clean through, a common problem on these rough roads. How long were you married, if you do not mind my asking? 14 months. Delia handed him the new hub from the back of the wagon. Thomas was a good man, just unlucky. We were married in Ohio and came west because he heard there was opportunity in California. He wanted to start a freight business with his brother. And now, Warren fitted the new hub onto the axle, checking the alignment. Now I suppose I will work for his brother instead if he will have me. I have no money to go back east and nothing waiting for me there anyway. My parents died last winter, both of them within a week of each other. It was the influenza. Warren heard the grief in her voice, carefully controlled but present nonetheless. I am sorry. That is a lot of loss for one person. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, Delia said quietly, but there was an edge to her words that suggested she was struggling with that particular truth. They finished installing the wheel as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the California hills in shades of gold and amber. Warren tested the repair thoroughly, making sure it would hold. That should get you to San Jose, but you should not travel alone. The roads are not safe for a woman by herself. Delia crossed her arms, a defensive gesture. I have been managing. You have been lucky, Warren corrected gently. There are bandits, drifters, and worse between here and San Jose. I am heading that way myself. We could travel together if you would feel comfortable with that. I give you my word I am an honorable man. She studied his face, those green eyes searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. I would appreciate the company, Mr. Cole. And the protection, though I can shoot if needed. I saw evidence of that with the rattlesnake, Warren said with a small smile. We should camp here tonight. Your horses look as tired as mine and it is getting dark. We can start fresh in the morning. They set up camp with the ease of people who both knew how to survive on the trail. Delia had flour and salt pork in her supplies, and Warren contributed coffee and beans from his saddlebags. As they prepared a simple meal over the fire, he found himself watching her again, fascinated by the way she moved, efficient and purposeful in everything she did. Why were you staring at the wagon before I came down? Warren asked as they ate. Before you knew I was there. Delia looked surprised by the question. How did you know I was staring, the way you turned around? You had been still for a while. She was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. I was thinking about singing, she said finally. My mother always said that singing kept the darkness away. When things got hard, she would sing, and somehow it made everything feel less heavy. I was trying to decide if I still believed that. And do you? I am not sure yet. She looked at him across the fire, her face half in shadow. Do you sing, Mr. Cole? Not if I want anyone to stay within earshot, Warren admitted, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger and less burdened. But I like listening to people who can. You have a beautiful voice. Delia blushed, visible even in the firelight. Thank you. It was one of the few things Thomas liked about me. One of the few. She looked away, uncomfortable. We did not know each other well when we married. It was practical more than romantic. He needed a wife to come west, and I needed to leave Ohio. We were still learning each other when he got sick. Warren heard what she wasn't saying, that she had not loved her husband, or at least not in the way marriages were supposed to be built on. He wondered if Thomas had loved her, or if it had been practical on both sides. I am sorry you did not get more time to figure it out. Some things are not meant to be, I suppose. Delia stood up, brushing off her skirt. I should try to sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." Warren nodded, standing as well. "You take the wagon. I will bed down out here by the fire." "Are you sure?" "I am used to sleeping under the stars, and it is a warm night." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for trusting me enough to let me travel with you." Delia gave him a small smile. "Thank you for stopping when you heard the gunshot. Not many men would have." After she climbed into the wagon, Warren sat by the fire for a long time, staring at the flames and trying to understand what he was feeling. He had known this woman for only a few hours, but something about her had gotten under his skin. Maybe it was the singing, or the way she had kept going despite losing everyone she loved. Maybe it was just that green-eyed gaze that seemed to see right through his usual defenses. He was still thinking about her when he finally rolled into his blankets and let sleep take him. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and they were on the trail by the time the sun cleared the eastern hills. Delia drove her wagon with practiced ease, and Warren rode alongside on his mare, keeping watch on the surrounding landscape. They talked as they traveled, the kind of getting-to-know-you conversation that felt both ordinary and significant. Warren told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his own parents to Comanche raiders when he was 15, about the years he spent drifting from job to job trying to figure out what he wanted from life. Delia listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. In turn, she told him about Ohio, about her father's workshop and the smell of wood shavings, about her mother's garden and the way she could make anything grow. She talked about feeling trapped in their small town, about wanting more from life than what had been laid out for her. She had married Thomas not because she loved him, but because he was offering an escape, a chance to see something beyond the same streets she had walked her entire life. "I felt guilty about that after he died," Delia admitted as they stopped to rest the horses near a creek. "That I had used him like that, even though he was using me too in a way. He needed a wife to seem respectable, to show his brother he was settled and serious. We were supposed to be partners in a business arrangement, but then he got sick, and I realized I did not even know what his favorite food was, or what made him laugh." Warren handed her a canteen. "You cannot blame yourself for that. Sometimes people come together for practical reasons, and that is all right. You both knew what you were getting into." "Did we, though?" Delia took a long drink, then splashed some water on her face. "I think we both hoped it might become something more eventually, but now I will never know." They reached San Jose 3 days later, traveling through the Santa Clara Valley with its orchards and farms spreading out in all directions. The town itself was bustling with activity, a mix of Spanish and American influences that gave it a unique character. Adobe buildings stood next to wooden storefronts, and the streets were crowded with farmers, merchants, and families going about their business. Delia directed them to an address on the outskirts of town, a freight yard where her brother-in-law ran his business. As they approached, Warren felt his stomach tighten with unexpected nervousness. Once they reached this destination, Delia would have no more need of him. She would be safe with family, and he would continue on his way to wherever he was going next. The thought bothered him more than it should have. The freight yard was bigger than Warren expected, with several large warehouses and a corral full of draft horses. A man came out of one of the buildings as they pulled up, wiping his hands on a rag. He was older than Thomas must have been, maybe 35, with a thick build and suspicious eyes. "Can I help you?" he called out, his gaze moving from Warren to Delia and back again. Delia set the wagon brake and climbed down. "Robert, I am Delia, Thomas's wife." Robert Brennan's face went pale. "Where is Thomas? He died of cholera near Carson City 6 weeks ago." "I am sorry to bring you this news." Warren watched as Robert processed this information, saw the grief and shock cross his features. "Come inside," Robert said finally, his voice rough. "We should talk." Delia glanced back at Warren, uncertainty in her eyes. He dismounted and tied his horse. "I will come with you if you want." She nodded gratefully, and they followed Robert into a small office attached to one of the warehouses. It was cluttered with papers and ledgers, the organized chaos of a busy business. Robert poured 3 glasses of whiskey with shaking hands, passing them around before sinking into a chair behind the desk. "Tell me what happened," he said to Delia. She recounted the journey from Ohio, Thomas falling ill, the terrible week watching him fade despite everything the doctor in Carson City tried to do. She spoke matter-of-factly, as if talking about someone else's tragedy, but Warren could see the cost in the tightness around her eyes. When she finished, Robert drained his glass and poured another. "Thomas was my baby brother. I was supposed to look after him." "There was nothing anyone could have done," Delia said quietly. "The cholera took him fast." Robert looked at Warren for the first time with real attention. "And who are you?" "Warren Cole. I met your sister-in-law on the trail when her wagon wheel broke. I helped with the repairs and made sure she got here safely." "So you are not her husband?" "No, sir. Just someone who helped out a traveler in need." Robert studied him with those suspicious eyes, clearly trying to figure out what Warren's angle was. "And now that you have delivered her, you will be on your way." Warren felt Delia's gaze on him but kept his attention on Robert. "That depends on whether Mrs. Brennan needs anything else from me." "I am sure she will be fine under my roof," Robert said, an edge to his voice. "I appreciate you helping her, but family takes care of family now." There was something in Robert's tone that Warren did not like, a possessiveness that made his instincts prickle. But Delia was a widow and Robert was her family by marriage, so Warren had no right to interfere. "Of course. I am glad I could help." He looked at Delia, trying to read her expression. She seemed uncertain, maybe even worried, but she also knew she had few options. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said formally. "I am grateful for everything you have done." Warren wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that she could come with him, that they could figure something out together. But that was insane. He had known her for 5 days. "You did not ask a widow to run off with you after 5 days, no matter how much her singing had wormed its way into your heart." "If you need anything," Warren said carefully, "I will be in town for a few days at least. I am looking for work, so I will likely be around." Delia's eyes brightened slightly at this news. "That is good to know." Robert stood up, clearly eager to end this conversation. "I am sure Mrs. Brennan will be too busy settling in to need any more assistance, but we thank you nonetheless." Warren took the dismissal for what it was and tipped his hat to Delia. "Madam, I hope things work out well for you here." He walked out of the office feeling like he was making a mistake but not knowing how to fix it. As he mounted his horse, he heard raised voices from inside the building, Robert's deep rumble and Delia's higher but firm responses. Whatever they were discussing, it was clearly not friendly. Warren rode back into the main part of town, telling himself it was none of his business. Delia was family to Robert, and surely he would take care of her. But the feeling of wrongness persisted as he found a boarding house and secured a room for the week. That night, he lay awake thinking about auburn hair and green eyes, about a voice singing hymns in the wilderness. He thought about the way Delia had laughed at his joke about his singing, about how she had worked beside him fixing that wagon wheel without complaint. Somewhere in those 5 days on the trail, something had shifted inside him, and he was not sure how to shift it back. The next morning, Warren went looking for work. San Jose was prosperous enough that he figured he could find something, and he was right. A rancher named Martinez needed help breaking horses, and Warren was good with horses. They agreed on wages and a start date, and Warren felt a little better knowing he had a reason to stay in town beyond his confused feelings about a woman he barely knew. He was walking back from the ranch when he saw Delia coming out of the general store, carrying a basket of supplies. She looked tired, and there was a bruise forming on her left cheek that had definitely not been there yesterday. Warren's blood went cold. He crossed the street quickly, intercepting her before she could reach the freight yard. "Mrs. Brennan." She jumped, startled, and her hand went to her face instinctively, covering the bruise. "Mr. Cole, I did not expect to see you. What happened to your face?" Warren kept his voice low and calm, though fury was building in his chest. "I tripped carrying boxes down from the loft," Delia said quickly, not meeting his eyes. "It is nothing. Look at me." When she did, reluctantly, Warren saw the truth in her expression. "Did Robert do that?" "It is a family matter," Delia said quietly. "Please do not make trouble. Family does not mean someone gets to hit you." Warren glanced around, aware they were drawing attention on the street. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Delia hesitated, clearly torn. "I should get back. Robert will be angry if I am gone too long. He is already angry enough to hit you. 5 more minutes will not make it worse, but it might help you figure out what to do next." Finally, she nodded. They walked to a small plaza near the old mission, sitting on a bench under a pepper tree where they could talk without being overheard. Delia set down her basket and folded her hands in her lap, staring at them. "Tell me what is happening," Warren said gently. "Robert is angry that Thomas died before reaching San Jose. He had put money into bringing us out here, and now he feels cheated. He says I owe him for the investment he made in my passage west." Delia's voice was barely above a whisper. "He wants me to work in his warehouses to pay off the debt. And last night when I said I did not think that was fair, that Thomas was his brother and he should not charge me for mourning, he hit me." Warren's hands clenched into fists. "You cannot stay there. I have nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no options." She finally looked at him, her green eyes wet with unshed tears. "I am trapped, Mr. Cole, again." "What if you were not?" The words came out before Warren had fully thought them through, but once they were out, he realized he meant them. "What if there was another option? What are you saying?" Warren took a deep breath. "Marry me." Delia stared at him like he had lost his mind. "What? I know it sounds crazy. We have known each other less than a week. But think about it practically, the way you and Thomas thought about marriage. You need protection and a way to escape Robert. I need." He paused, trying to find the right words. "I have been drifting for years, never putting down roots because nothing felt right. But these past few days with you, they have felt right. More right than anything has in a long time. You cannot possibly want to marry me because of 5 days on a trail," Delia protested, but there was hope creeping into her voice despite herself. "Why not? People marry for less. You married Thomas after knowing him how long? 6 weeks. Well, there you go. Give me another 5 weeks and I will have doubled that." Warren reached out and gently took her hand. "I am not saying I am in love with you, though I will admit I am well on my way to it. But I am saying I know enough to know I want to keep knowing you. I like who I am when I am around you. And if marrying me gets you away from a man who hits you, then that seems like a good enough reason to start." Delia's tears finally spilled over. "What if I am bad luck? Everyone I care about dies or leaves. Then I guess we will have to break that pattern together." Warren squeezed her hand. "I am offering you a choice, Delia. A real one this time. Not escape from a small town, but a chance to build something genuine. We could start over, both of us. See what happens when 2 people actually choose each other instead of just using each other." She was quiet for a long moment, and Warren held his breath, waiting. Finally, she said, "I sang yesterday after you left. Despite everything with Robert, I sang while I was unpacking in the room he gave me. My mother's words came back to me, about singing keeping the darkness away. And I realized the only times I have felt like singing since Thomas died were when I was with you. Warren's heart hammered in his chest. Is that a yes? It is a maybe heading strongly toward yes, Delia said, and despite the tears and the bruise and the impossibility of the situation, she smiled. Ask me again in 3 days. If you still mean it and I still want it, we can go to the mission and speak to the priest. 3 days, Warren agreed. But you cannot stay at the freight yard. Robert might hurt you again. There is a boarding house for women near the mission. Mrs. Garcia runs it. I met her at the general store this morning. She mentioned she had a room available if I ever needed one. Delia stood up, looking more determined than frightened now. I will tell Robert I am moving out, that I will work for him to pay the debt, but I will not live under his roof. I am going with you, Warren said firmly. He will not hit you again, not while I am around. They walked back to the freight yard together, and Warren waited outside while Delia went into the office. He heard shouting almost immediately, Robert's voice angry and accusatory. Warren was about to go inside when Delia emerged, her face set and her carpetbag in her hand. Robert came storming out after her. You cannot just leave. You owe me. I will work for you to settle whatever debt you think is fair, Delia said, her voice steady despite the fear Warren could see in her eyes. But I will not live here. I will find my own lodging. The hell you will. You are my responsibility now, my brother's widow. I am my own responsibility, Delia corrected. I am 24 years old and perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Robert's face was getting red. If you walk away now, do not expect any help from me. You will be on your own. I have been on my own since Thomas died, Delia said quietly. I will manage. She turned and walked away, and Robert started to follow her. Warren stepped into his path. I think the lady has made herself clear. Who the hell do you think you are? Robert demanded. Someone who does not think hitting women is acceptable, Warren said evenly. Back off. For a moment it looked like Robert might take a swing at him, but Warren was younger and clearly ready for a fight. Robert seemed to recalculate. This is not over, he said to Delia. Yes, it is, she replied and kept walking. Warren followed her, staying alert in case Robert changed his mind about that fight. But the older man just stood there, glaring after them until they turned a corner and lost sight of him. That was brave, Warren said when they were safely away. That was terrifying, Delia corrected, but she was smiling a little. I have never stood up to someone like that before. You did good. Warren took her carpetbag, carrying it for her as they walked toward the boarding house. How much do you actually owe him? I have no idea. He never showed me any accounting. Thomas was supposed to be bringing some money with him, savings from Ohio, but that went to pay for his burial and the doctor's fees. I do not think Robert has any legitimate claim on me, but he is the kind of man who will not let that stop him. They reached Mrs. Garcia's boarding house, a neat 2-story building with flower boxes in the windows and a clean, swept porch. The proprietor herself answered the door, a round woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steel gray hair pulled back in a bun. Mrs. Brennan, she said warmly. I wondered if I might see you today after our conversation. And who is this? Warren Cole, madam. I am a friend of Mrs. Brennan's. She needs a room if you still have one available. Mrs. Garcia looked between them with knowing eyes, clearly reading more into the situation than they were saying. I do have a room. Nice one on the 2nd floor, gets good light in the mornings. And I do not tolerate any trouble here, so if someone is bothering you, Mrs. Brennan, they will have to go through me first. Thank you, Delia said, relief evident in her voice. I can pay weekly once I start working. We will work something out. Come in, let me show you the room. Warren waited downstairs while Mrs. Garcia took Delia up to see the accommodations. When they came back down, Delia looked more settled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "It is perfect," she told Warren. "Thank you for walking me here." "I will come by tomorrow," Warren said. "We can talk more then." He left before he could do something stupid like kiss her goodbye. 3 days he had promised her. 3 days to be sure this was what they both wanted. He just had to survive 72 hours without changing his mind or letting her change hers. Those 3 days felt like the longest of Warren's life. He started work at the Martinez ranch, breaking horses and mending fences, and trying not to think about green eyes and auburn hair. But Delia was never far from his thoughts. Every night he lay in his boarding house room and wondered if he was being reckless, proposing marriage to a woman he barely knew. Every morning he woke up sure that he wanted to marry her anyway. He saw her each evening after work. They would meet at the plaza by the mission and walk through the town together, talking about everything and nothing. Delia told him about growing up in Ohio, about learning to sing in the church choir, about the dreams she had for her life before reality narrowed her options. Warren shared stories from his years of drifting, the places he had seen and the people he had met, the slow realization that what he really wanted was someone to come home to. "I am scared," Delia admitted on the second evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Not of you, but of making another mistake, of choosing wrong again." "Choosing Thomas was not wrong," Warren said thoughtfully. "It was the right choice for who you were then, for what you needed. Maybe this is just the right choice for who you are now. And who am I now?" Warren considered the question seriously. Someone brave enough to stand up to Robert, someone strong enough to cross half a continent alone, someone who still sings even when the world gives her every reason to stop. Delia leaned her head against his shoulder, and Warren felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was what he had been drifting toward all those years. This woman, this moment, this choice. On the third day, Warren woke up absolutely certain. He dressed in his best clothes, which admittedly were not that impressive, but he did what he could. He bought flowers from a vendor in the market and went to Mrs. Garcia's boarding house with his heart pounding like a drum. Delia answered the door herself, and Warren's breath caught. She was wearing a simple green dress that matched her eyes, and her hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. She looked beautiful and terrified and hopeful all at once. "I still want to marry you," Warren said without preamble. "I have thought about nothing else for 3 days, and I am more sure now than I was when I first asked." Delia smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I still want to say yes. I am scared, but I want to say yes anyway. Then let us go talk to the priest." They walked to the mission hand in hand, both of them nervous and excited in equal measure. The priest, Father Miguel, was an elderly man with laugh lines around his eyes and a patient demeanor. He listened to their request with interest, then asked them to sit down in his small office. "Marriage is a sacred commitment," he said gently. "It is not something to be entered into lightly or for purely practical reasons. Tell me, why do you want to marry each other?" Warren looked at Delia, then back at the priest. "I am not sure I can explain it in a way that makes sense. But when I am with her, I feel like I have finally found what I have been looking for. She makes me want to be better, to build something lasting. And I think I can give her safety and partnership and a chance to figure out who she wants to be without anyone else telling her." "And you, Mrs. Brennan?" Father Miguel asked. Delia was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "My first marriage was practical. I did not love Thomas, though I tried to, but Warren is right. It was what I needed then. What I need now is different. I need someone who sees me as a person, not a possession. Someone who makes me feel like singing again. Warren does that, Father Miguel smiled. Those are good answers, better than many I have heard from couples who have known each other for years. But I must ask, are you certain you want to move this quickly? You could have a long engagement, take time to truly know each other. We could, Warren agreed. But Delia's brother-in-law is making her situation difficult. The sooner she is my wife, the sooner she is protected from his claims on her. I see. The priest folded his hands on his desk. Very well. I will agree to marry you, but I want you to spend the next week preparing. Come to me each evening and we will talk about what marriage means, about the vows you will take. If at the end of that week you still want to proceed, I will perform the ceremony. Warren felt a mix of disappointment and relief. Another week was not unreasonable, and it would give them more time to be sure. Thank you, Father. That week became a strange and wonderful time. By day, Warren worked at the Martinez Ranch, learning that he enjoyed the work more than he had expected. Senor Martinez was a fair employer, and the other ranch hands were decent men who did not ask too many questions about Warren's plans to marry a widow he had just met. In the evenings, Warren and Delia met with Father Miguel, discussing commitment and faith, compromise and love. The priest told them stories of marriages he had witnessed, the good and the bad, the lessons learned. He made them think about what they wanted their life together to look like, how they would handle disagreements, what they hoped for in the future. They also spent time alone together, carefully chaperoned by Mrs. Garcia, who seemed to take it as her personal mission to make sure everything was proper. They walked through the orchards surrounding the town, picking apples and talking about their childhoods. They sat on the porch of the boarding house and played card games, learning each other's competitive streaks and senses of humor. They went to church together on Sunday and stood side by side singing hymns, Delia's voice clear and strong, Warren's barely audible but earnest. It was during those evenings that Warren fell completely in love with her. Not the startled attraction he had felt when he first heard her singing, but something deeper and more solid. He loved the way her mind worked, practical but also full of wonder. He loved her stubbornness and her kindness in equal measure. He loved that she did not need him to rescue her, but was willing to let him stand beside her anyway. Delia seemed to be having her own revelations. I did not know marriage could be like this, she told him one evening as they sat on a bench near the mission, watching children play in the plaza. Thomas and I, we were always polite but distant, like business partners who happen to share a wagon, but with you, I feel like I can say anything. Like you actually want to know what I think. I do want to know what you think, Warren said, taking her hand. About everything. I want to know what makes you laugh and what makes you angry and what you dream about late at night when you cannot sleep. I dream about singing, Delia admitted. I always have. When I was young, I thought maybe I could perform, travel with a theater company or something grand like that. My mother said it was not practical, that I should focus on more realistic goals, so I put it away and tried to be sensible. Maybe you could sing again, not in a theater but somewhere. There must be a church that needs a choir director, or you could give lessons to children. Delia's eyes lit up. Do you really think so? I think you should do whatever makes you happy. We will figure out the practical parts together. Robert Brennan made his presence known exactly twice during that week. The first time, he came to Mrs. Garcia's boarding house demanding to speak with Delia. Mrs. Garcia sent him away with a lecture about proper behavior and a threat to call the sheriff if he came back. The second time, he cornered Warren outside the general store, trying to convince him that Delia was more trouble than she was worth. She will spend all your money and give you nothing but grief, Robert said, his voice low and intense. My brother found that out quick enough. She is cold, frigid even. not worth the effort of a wife. Warren felt his temper rise but kept it controlled. I do not know what kind of marriage your brother had, but I know that any woman would seem cold to a man who sees her as property instead of a partner. Delia is fine just the way she is, and I would appreciate if you left her and me alone from now on. You will regret this, Robert warned. I doubt it, Warren replied and walked away before he gave in to the urge to plant his fist in the older man's face. Finally, the week was over. Father Miguel called them into his office on Saturday evening and asked them one final time if they were sure. Both Warren and Delia said yes without hesitation. Then we will have the ceremony tomorrow after regular services, the priest said with a warm smile. I will need 2 witnesses. Do you have anyone in mind? Mrs. Garcia has agreed to stand for me, Delia said. And Señor Martinez said he would stand for me, Warren added. His employer had been supportive when Warren explained the situation, even giving him a bonus to help set up a household. Perfect. Then I will see you both tomorrow morning. Wear your finest clothes and bring open hearts. That night, Warren could barely sleep. Tomorrow he would marry Delia, would promise before God and witnesses to love and cherish her for the rest of his life. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The morning dawned bright and warm, one of those perfect California days where the sky was impossibly blue, and everything seemed to shine with possibility. Warren dressed in the new shirt and vest he had bought for the occasion, his hands shaking slightly as he worked the buttons. He had been in gunfights and stampedes, had faced down angry bulls and drunken cowboys, but he had never been as nervous as he was right now. He walked to the mission early, wanting time to compose himself. The building was beautiful in the morning light, its white adobe walls glowing warm and its bell tower reaching toward the sky. Warren stood in the courtyard, listening to the bell ring for services, and thought about the strange path that had led him here. Regular services ended, and people filed out, chatting and laughing. Señor Martinez found Warren and clapped him on the shoulder. Ready to become a married man. As ready as I will ever be, Warren admitted. You are doing a good thing, his employer said seriously. I have seen you with Mrs. Brennan. You are good for each other. That is rarer than people think. Inside the mission, Father Miguel was preparing the altar. The church had emptied except for a few people who had chosen to stay for the wedding, curious locals who always attended such events. Warren took his place at the front, Señor Martinez beside him, and waited. Then Delia entered from the back of the church, and Warren forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garcia had helped her make in secret over the past week, altering it from one of Mrs. Garcia's own wedding gowns. Her auburn hair was loose around her shoulders, with those same white flowers woven through it. She looked like something from a dream, beautiful and real, and walking toward him with a smile on her face. Mrs. Garcia walked beside her, beaming with pride like a mother giving away a daughter. When they reached the front, the older woman kissed Delia's cheek and whispered something that made Delia laugh quietly. Then she stepped back, taking her place as witness, and Delia joined Warren before the altar. Father Miguel began the ceremony, his voice calm and sure as he spoke about love and commitment, about the sanctity of marriage and the responsibilities it entailed. Warren heard the words but was more focused on Delia's face, on the way her green eyes never left his, on the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Do you, Warren Cole, take Delia Brennan to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part? I do, Warren said, his voice strong and clear. And do you, Delia Brennan, take Warren Cole to be your lawfully wedded husband, To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part. Delia's voice was softer but no less certain. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the Catholic Church and the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Warren, you may kiss your bride. Warren stepped forward, gently cupping Delia's face in his hands. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, and Warren could see tears of happiness in Delia's eyes. But then something unexpected happened. As Father Miguel was about to dismiss them, Delia turned to him. "Father, may I sing before we leave, as my gift to my husband?" The priest smiled. "Of course, my dear." Delia stood in front of the altar, her hands clasped loosely before her, and began to sing. It was the same hymn Warren had heard that first day in the canyon, about green pastures and still waters, about restoration and peace. But now there was something different in her voice, a joy and confidence that had not been there before. She sang like someone who had found her way home after being lost, and the sound filled the church with beauty. Warren watched her, this woman who was now his wife, and felt his heart expand with love. 3 weeks ago, he had been a drifter with no particular destination. Now he was a married man standing in a mission church, listening to the most beautiful voice he had ever heard singing their beginning. When Delia finished, there was not a dry eye in the church. Even the curious locals who had stayed were wiping at their faces. Father Miguel blessed them both again, and then Warren and Delia walked down the aisle hand in hand, emerging into the bright California sunshine as husband and wife. Mrs. Garcia had arranged a small celebration back at the boarding house, and a handful of people attended, including several of her other tenants, Señor Martinez and his wife, and a few neighbors who had heard about the wedding. There was food and music, and at one point someone convinced Delia to sing again. She did, this time a lively folk song that got everyone clapping along. Warren stood off to the side, watching his wife laugh and sing, and felt a contentment he had never known before. Señor Martinez joined him, handing him a glass of wine. "You look like a man at peace," the rancher observed. "I think I am," Warren replied. "For the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be." As the afternoon wore on, Warren and Delia finally managed to slip away from the celebration. Señor Martinez had offered them the use of a small cabin on his property, a place where the foreman usually stayed during busy seasons, but which was currently empty. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a porch, but it was private and it was theirs. They stood on the porch as the sun set, Warren's arm around Delia's waist and her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Delia said, no hesitation in her voice. "I did not think I could be, not after everything that has happened. But yes, I am happy. I am going to do everything I can to keep you that way." She looked up at him, her green eyes serious. "I know this started as a practical arrangement. But Warren, I need you to know that it has become more than that for me. I think I am falling in love with you." Warren's heart soared. "You think you are falling, or you know you are." "I know," Delia admitted with a smile. "I am definitely falling in love with you." "Good," Warren said, pulling her closer. "Because I am absolutely in love with you, have been since about the 2nd day of knowing you. Why did you not say anything?" "I did not want to pressure you. I figured you had enough to deal with without worrying about whether you were supposed to feel something you might not be ready for." Delia reached up and kissed him, longer and deeper than their first kiss in the church. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I am ready now," she whispered. They went inside the cabin, leaving the door open to let in the evening breeze. Warren lit a lamp while Delia looked around the simple space that would be their home. It had a bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, a stove for cooking, and shelves for their few possessions. "It is not much," Warren said, suddenly worried that she would find it inadequate. "It is perfect," Delia corrected. "It is ours. That is what matters." That night was tender and slightly awkward, both of them navigating the intimacy of marriage for the first time together. But there was laughter, too, and gentleness, and a growing sense of rightness as they learned each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Delia curled against his side, Warren said, "Tell me something you have never told anyone else." Delia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "When I was 10, I found a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. I tried to take care of it, but it died after 3 days. I buried it in my mother's garden and sang at its funeral like it was a person. I felt so foolish afterward, crying over a bird. But I think that was the first time I realized how hard it is to take care of something fragile, how easily things can be lost." Warren kissed the top of her head. "I do not think that is foolish at all. It shows you have a good heart. Your turn. Tell me something I do not know." "When my parents died, I was old enough that I could have tried to keep the ranch going, get help from neighbors, make it work. But I ran instead. I sold everything and left because I could not stand being in that house without them. I have always wondered if I was a coward for leaving." "You were 15 and traumatized," Delia said firmly. "You did what you needed to survive. That is not cowardice." They talked long into the night, sharing secrets and dreams, fears and hopes. By the time they finally fell asleep, Warren felt like he knew Delia better than he had known anyone in his life. And more importantly, he felt known by her in return. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their life together. Warren worked at the Martinez Ranch, learning the business of cattle and horses with an eye toward maybe starting his own small operation someday. Delia found work giving music lessons to children in town, and soon she was busy 3 afternoons a week teaching scales and songs. She also joined the church choir, and Father Miguel quickly made her the choir director when the previous one moved away. They spent their evenings together in the cabin, cooking simple meals and talking about their days. Sometimes Delia would sing while Warren played the harmonica he had bought from the general store, neither of them particularly skilled but both enjoying the music. Sometimes they would just sit on the porch and watch the stars come out, content in each other's presence. Robert Brennan made one more attempt to cause trouble, showing up at one of Delia's music lessons and demanding she repay the debt he claimed she owed. But by then, Delia had friends in town who knew her story, and several mothers whose children she taught made it clear that Robert was not welcome. He left town shortly after, headed north to Sacramento, and they heard he had sold the freight business to someone else. "I feel like I can finally breathe," Delia told Warren that night. "Like I was holding tension I did not even know about, and now it is gone." "He cannot touch you now," Warren said. "You are my wife, and more than that, you are part of this community. People care about you. Because of you, you helped me make a place here. No, because of you. I just walked beside you while you did it." 3 months after their wedding, Delia came home from giving lessons with a strange expression on her face. Warren looked up from the bridle he was mending. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Delia said slowly. "But I think I might be pregnant." Warren dropped the bridle. "You think or you know?" "I am pretty sure. All the signs are there. I have not told anyone yet, wanted to tell you first." Warren crossed the room in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "That is amazing, incredible. How are you feeling? Do you need to sit down?" "Should you be walking around?" Delia laughed, the sound full of joy. "I am fine. Women have babies all the time. It is not a sickness. But yes, I am happy. Scared but happy." They went to see the doctor the next day, who confirmed Delia's suspicion. She was about 8 weeks along, which meant the baby would come in early summer. Dr. Chen, a Chinese immigrant who had become the town's primary physician after the previous doctor died of a heart attack, gave Delia instructions on taking care of herself and told her to come back each month for a checkup. As Delia's pregnancy progressed, Warren found himself amazed by the changes in her body and spirit. She seemed to glow from within, her happiness evident in everything she did. She sang constantly now, not just during lessons or choir practice, but while cooking, while sewing, while doing any of the 100 small tasks that filled their days. "I never imagined this," she told him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Being this happy, feeling this safe. I keep waiting for something to go wrong because it feels too good to be real." "It is real," Warren assured her. "We made this, you and me, this life, this baby, all of it, and nothing is going to take it away." The baby came in June, a long, hot day that turned into an even longer night. Mrs. Garcia came to help, bringing with her a midwife named Rosa, who had delivered half the babies in San Jose. Warren was banished to the porch for most of it, pacing and worrying, listening to the sounds from inside and feeling completely helpless. When he finally heard a baby's cry, strong and indignant, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Garcia came out moments later, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Cole, and your wife is tired but well." Warren went inside to find Delia propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but smiling as she held a small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. He sat beside her, looking down at the tiny face peering out, a red, scrunched-up little person who was somehow his son. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, touching one miniature hand with his finger. The baby's fist closed around it, holding tight. "We need to name him," Delia said, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. They had discussed names over the previous months but had not decided anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Warren said, "What about Samuel? It means asked of God, and that feels right." "Samuel Cole," Delia tested the name. "I like it. Samuel Thomas Cole, after my father and your brother." Warren nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "That is perfect." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and loud when he wanted something but generally content. Warren discovered that fatherhood terrified and delighted him, every milestone feeling like a miracle. The first time Samuel smiled at him, Warren felt his heart expand. The first time the baby laughed, Delia cried happy tears. They moved out of the cabin and into a small house in town that fall, using money Warren had saved from his work and some that Delia had earned from her music lessons. It had 3 rooms and a real kitchen, even a small garden plot where Delia planted vegetables and flowers. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. Warren continued working for Señor Martinez, but had also started buying and breaking horses on his own, a side business that was slowly growing. Delia taught music lessons from their home now, and the sound of children practicing scales became as familiar as Samuel's babbling. On their first anniversary, Warren woke before dawn and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Delia or the baby sleeping in his cradle nearby. He went into the kitchen and made coffee, then sat at the table thinking about the past year. A year ago, he had been a drifter hearing a woman sing in a canyon. Now he was a husband, a father, a man with roots and responsibilities. It should have felt terrifying, but instead it felt right. He had found what he had been searching for without even knowing he was looking. Delia came out of the bedroom, wrapped in a shawl, and joined him at the table. "You are up early." "Could not sleep. Too busy thinking about how much my life has changed." "Good changes." she asked, though she was smiling like she already knew the answer, the best changes. Warren took her hand across the table. A year ago, I never could have imagined this, but Delia, you have given me everything I did not know I needed. You did the same for me, she said softly. I was so lost when you found me, not just physically lost on that trail, but lost in life. You helped me find my way back to myself. You were never lost, Warren corrected. You were just in between one chapter and the next. I just happened to show up at the right time to be part of the next chapter. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee as the sun rose outside their window. Samuel started fussing in the bedroom, and Delia went to get him, bringing him out to nurse while Warren made breakfast. Later that day, they had a small celebration with the friends they had made in San Jose. Mrs. Garcia brought a cake. Señor Martinez and his wife brought wine. Father Miguel came by to offer his blessings. It was simple but filled with love, exactly the kind of life Warren had dreamed of without knowing it. That night, after everyone had left and Samuel was asleep, Warren and Delia sat on their porch watching the stars. "Tell me what you are thinking," Warren said. "I am thinking about my mother," Delia admitted. "About what she said about singing keeping the darkness away. I did not understand it fully then, but I do now. It is not just the singing itself, it is the choice to sing. To keep choosing joy and beauty even when life is hard. You taught me that, Warren. You showed me that choosing hope is not naive, it is brave." "You are the bravest person I know," Warren said, pulling her close. "You lost everything and kept going. You stood up to Robert even though you were scared. You chose to trust me even though you had every reason to be cautious. That is real courage. We are good together," Delia said simply. "I did not know it could be like this marriage, that it could be partnership and passion and friendship all at once." "Neither did I," Warren admitted. "But I am glad we figured it out together." The years passed, bringing both challenges and blessings. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Delia had twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Grace. The house suddenly felt much smaller, and Warren worked extra hours to save money for an addition. The whole community pitched in to help build it, their friends showing up on weekends with tools and materials, turning it into a social event as much as a construction project. When Grace was 6 months old, she got sick with a terrible fever that had Delia and Warren terrified they would lose her. Dr. Chen came every day for a week, and they took turns sitting up with the baby, trying to keep her cool and comfortable. On the 7th night, the fever finally broke, and Grace slept peacefully for the first time in days. Warren found Delia in the rocking chair, holding their daughter and crying with relief. "I thought we were going to lose her," Delia whispered. "I kept thinking about my parents, about Thomas, about everyone I have loved who has died. I was so scared." "But she is all right," Warren said, kneeling beside the chair and putting his arms around both of them. "She is going to be fine." "How do you do this?" Delia asked. "How do you keep loving people when you know you could lose them?" "Because not loving them would be worse," Warren said simply. "The risk of loss is part of what makes love precious. You taught me that actually when you agreed to marry me even though you were scared. You chose love anyway, and that changed everything." Delia leaned into him, and they sat like that for a long time, holding their daughter and each other, grateful for another day together. Warren's horse business grew steadily, and eventually he had enough to buy a small ranch of his own just outside San Jose. It was not huge, but it had good pasture and a decent barn, room enough to raise horses and their growing family. They moved when the twins were 3, and Samuel was 5, into a house that Warren and Delia designed together, making sure it had everything they needed, including a music room where Delia could give lessons and practice with her students. On moving day, as they stood on the porch of their new home watching the sun set over their land, Warren said, "We have come a long way from that canyon where I found you singing." "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," Delia admitted. "That I get to wake up every morning next to you, that these beautiful children are ours, that I have a home and work I love and friends who care about us." "Believe it," Warren said, kissing her temple. "You earned every bit of this happiness." "We earned it," Delia corrected. "Together." Samuel started school that fall, and Warren found himself unexpectedly emotional, watching his eldest son walk into the schoolhouse for the first time. "When did he get so big?" he asked Delia, who was also wiping her eyes. "When we were not looking," she replied. "They grow so fast." The twins started school 2 years later, and suddenly the house felt quiet during the day. Delia threw herself into her music teaching, taking on more students and starting a community choir that met twice a week. Warren's ranch continued to prosper, his reputation for breeding good horses spreading throughout the region. When Samuel was 10, he asked if he could learn to play guitar. Warren bought him one and paid for lessons, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of practicing mixed with Delia's singing and the twins' constant chatter. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. One evening, after a particularly trying day when the twins had gotten into a fight and Samuel had fallen out of a tree and scraped his arm badly, Warren found Delia sitting on the porch looking exhausted. "Some days are harder than others," she said when he joined her. "They are," Warren agreed. "But even the hard days are good because we are living them together." "When did you become so wise?" Delia teased, leaning against him. "I think it rubbed off from you." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing each other deeply. Warren thought about the young man he had been when he first heard Delia singing, rootless and unsure of what he wanted from life. He could barely recognize that person now. "You ever regret it?" Delia asked suddenly. "Marrying me so quickly, tying yourself down when you could have kept drifting?" "Never," Warren said without hesitation. "Not once, not even for a second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Delia. You and our children, this life we have built. I would not change a single thing. Even the sleepless nights with babies, the tight money in the early years. The time Daniel broke his arm and we were so scared. Even all of that," Warren confirmed. "Because it is real, you know. It is a real life with real problems and real joys, and I get to share all of it with you. That is worth more than any amount of freedom to drift." Delia turned to kiss him, soft and sweet. "I love you, Warren Cole, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too, always have, always will." The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, school performances and horse sales, arguments and laughter and all the ordinary moments that made up a life. Samuel grew into a serious young man who loved working with horses like his father. The twins developed distinct personalities, Daniel quiet and thoughtful, Grace bold and outspoken. When Samuel turned 18, he announced he wanted to start his own horse breeding program, specializing in horses for ranch work. Warren gave him a section of their land to use and helped him get started, proud of his son's ambition and work ethic. "He reminds me of you," Delia told Warren one night as they watched Samuel working with a young colt in the corral. "Same focus, same patience." "He has your stubbornness, though," Warren pointed out with a grin. "That is not stubbornness, that is determination," Delia protested, but she was smiling. The twins graduated from school the same year and both had plans for the future. Daniel wanted to become a teacher, inspired by his mother's work with music students. Grace announced she was going to study medicine, determined to become a doctor like Dr. Chen, who had saved her life when she was a baby. How do we raise such ambitious children? Warren asked, amazed. We showed them it was possible to build a life you love, Delia said simply. They are just following our example. As their children grew into adults and started their own lives, Warren and Delia found themselves with time to focus on each other again. They took long rides together through the hills, revisiting the places they had explored in their early years. They spent evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, still finding new things to discover about each other, even after decades together. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting everyone they had ever known in San Jose. The house and yard were packed with people, multiple generations who had been touched by Warren and Delia's presence in the community. There were families whose children Delia had taught, ranchers who had bought horses from Warren, friends who had shared in their joys and sorrows over the years. Father Miguel, now quite elderly, gave a toast. I married these two when they had known each other for less than a month. Many people thought they were crazy, rushing into marriage like that. But I saw something in them that day, a rightness that could not be denied. And look at what they have built together. Not just a family, though that is beautiful, but a life of purpose and love that has blessed this entire community. Everyone cheered, and Warren felt his throat tighten with emotion. He looked at Delia, who was crying happy tears, and pulled her close. Later, after everyone had left and they were cleaning up, Samuel said, "Tell us the story again, about how you met." Warren and Delia looked at each other and laughed. Their children had heard the story dozens of times, but they never tired of it. "I was singing in a canyon," Delia began. "And I was drifting through, looking for work," Warren continued. "He found me with a broken wagon wheel and no way to fix it alone. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, standing there singing hymns like the world was not harsh and dangerous. He offered to help, and then he offered to protect me, and then 3 weeks later we were married." "Best decision I ever made," Warren said, kissing his wife's forehead. "Best decision we both made," Delia corrected. Their children smiled, having heard this affirmation countless times but never tiring of the reminder that their parents chose each other, and kept choosing each other, every single day. When Warren was 60, a stroke left his right side partially paralyzed. It was terrifying, suddenly being dependent on others when he had been strong and capable his whole life. But Delia was patient with him, helping him through the long months of recovery, encouraging him when he got frustrated, celebrating every small victory. "I am sorry," Warren said one night when he was struggling to button his shirt and wanted to throw something in frustration. "This is not what you signed up for." "Yes, it is," Delia said firmly, taking over the buttons with gentle hands. "In sickness and in health, remember. Those vows we sang 27 years ago, they mean something. You are stuck with me, Warren Cole, no matter what." "I am not stuck," Warren said, catching her hand. "I am blessed." He eventually regained most of his mobility, though he was never quite as strong as he had been. But he adapted, learning to do things differently, accepting help when needed. Samuel took over most of the physical work on the ranch, and Warren shifted into an advisory role, using his decades of experience to guide his son's decisions. Life continued its forward march. Daniel became a teacher as planned, marrying a sweet girl named Clara and having 3 children of his own. Grace defied everyone's expectations by not only becoming a doctor, but opening her own practice in San Jose, one of the few female physicians in California. Samuel married his childhood sweetheart and continued building the horse breeding program, eventually becoming known throughout the state for the quality of his stock. Warren and Delia became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family tree spreading in all directions. Their home remained a gathering place, especially for Sunday dinners, where the entire extended family would crowd around tables set up in the yard, sharing food and laughter and stories. On their 40th anniversary, Delia surprised Warren by organizing a renewal of their vows. The entire family gathered at the mission where they had been married, filling the same church where they had first said those promises to each other. Father Miguel had passed away years earlier, but the new priest, Father Antonio, had heard the story and was honored to perform the ceremony. Warren and Delia stood before the altar, their hands clasped, their faces lined with age but their eyes bright with the same love that had brought them together 4 decades earlier. Do you, Warren Cole, renew your vow to love, honor, and cherish Delia in good times and bad for the rest of your days? I do, Warren said, his voice still strong despite his years. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. And do you, Delia Cole, renew your vow to love, honor, and cherish Warren in good times and bad for the rest of your days? I do, Delia replied. Forever and always. Then, just as she had done at their wedding 40 years earlier, Delia sang. Her voice was not as strong as it once had been, touched by age like the rest of her, but it was still beautiful, still full of the joy and faith that had defined her life. She sang about green pastures and still waters, about goodness and mercy following her all the days of her life. When she finished, there was not a dry eye in the church. Their children and grandchildren, their friends and neighbors, everyone who had gathered to witness this renewal of love, all of them were moved by the power of commitment kept, of promises fulfilled. Warren stepped forward and kissed his wife, and it felt exactly like that first kiss 40 years ago, full of promise and hope, and the certainty that they were meant to be together. Afterward, there was another party, a celebration that lasted late into the evening. Warren and Delia danced, carefully because of his lingering weakness from the stroke, but they danced nonetheless, moving slowly to music played by their grandchildren who had inherited Delia's musical talent. 40 years, Warren said as they swayed together. I never imagined I would be this lucky. It is not luck, Delia said, her head on his shoulder. It is choice. We chose each other 40 years ago and we have kept choosing each other every day since. That is not luck, that is love. You are right, Warren agreed. As usual. Delia laughed, the sound still able to make his heart skip a beat even after all these years. Tell me something I do not know. I do not think there is anything left I have not told you, Warren said. You know all my secrets, all my dreams, all my fears. You know me better than I know myself sometimes. And I love everything I know, Delia said softly. Every single part of you. They continued to dance as the evening turned to night, surrounded by the family they had created, the life they had built. And Warren thought about that day in the canyon, about hearing a woman sing and following that voice without knowing it would lead him here. He had been looking for work, for a place to belong, for something he could not quite name. And he had found all of that and more in a woman with green eyes and auburn hair, in a voice that sang of hope even in the wilderness. Warren lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep, one spring morning with Delia beside him. His last words to her, whispered the night before when they were talking in the darkness, were, "Thank you for singing that day in the canyon. Thank you for letting me find you." Delia held his hand as he slipped away, singing softly, the same hymn she had been singing the day they met. And though her heart was breaking, she kept singing because that was what you did. You kept choosing beauty and hope and love, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. She lived 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, teaching music almost until the end. When she died, it was also peacefully, in the same bed she had shared with Warren for over 4 decades. Her last words were about him, about how much she had loved him, about how grateful she was that a broken wagon wheel had brought them together. They were buried side by side in the San Jose cemetery, under a large oak tree that provided shade in the summer. Their headstone read simply, Warren Cole, 1852, 1930 Delia Cole, 1854-1933. He heard her singing, and everything changed. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued their legacy. Samuel's horse breeding program became one of the most respected in California. Daniel's students went on to become teachers themselves, spreading education throughout the state. Grace's medical practice served the community for decades, saving countless lives. And all of them, every single person descended from Warren and Delia, carried something of their great love story forward into the world. Years later, when the great-grandchildren would ask about their ancestors, the story was always the same. About a drifter who heard a woman singing in a canyon, about a widow with a broken wagon wheel and a heavy heart, about a choice made in 3 weeks that changed 2 lives forever. About love found in unexpected places, about vows kept through decades of joys and sorrows, about a man and a woman who found each other exactly when they both needed to be found. It became the kind of story that families pass down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings. And somewhere in that story, always, was the image of Delia standing before an altar, singing their vows with a voice that made everyone believe in the power of love, in the beauty of commitment, in the possibility of finding your person even in the harsh landscape of the Old West. 3 weeks from stranger to spouse seemed impossible, but Warren and Delia proved it could work. Not because they were lucky, not because it was easy, but because they chose each other and kept choosing each other every single day for over 40 years. They built a life of purpose and passion, of family and community, of ordinary moments that added up to something extraordinary. Their story became part of San Jose's history, one of those tales that people told when they wanted to believe in love, in second chances, in the idea that you could lose everything and still find happiness. And long after both of them were gone, their legacy remained in the children they raised, the horses Samuel bred, the students Daniel taught, the patients Grace healed, and the music that still filled their family gatherings. Because in the end, Warren and Delia's story was not really about a quick marriage or a dramatic rescue. It was about 2 lonely people who found each other, who chose to trust in something bigger than their fear, who built something beautiful out of loss and loneliness. It was about keeping your promises, singing through the darkness, and believing that love was worth the risk. And it all started with a voice in a canyon, soft and sweet, singing of green pastures and still waters, and a man who followed that voice into the most important decision of his life.